Hey, what's up guys, my name is Abdul Nafe, and if you have ever wanted to create your very own car game inside of Unreal Engine 5, then this course is going to be perfect for you. Because in this course, we're going to be creating a car game in Unreal Engine 5 from scratch. We're going to be importing the model of the car, we're going to be rigging it, we're going to be making the car drivable, and after that, we're going to be adding textures to the car and making it look hyper realistic. Then we're also going to be working on a whole timer system, a whole checkpoint system, and a finish line system, which is going to sort of create the mechanics of the game and make the game actually enjoyable to play. After that, we're going to be covering the whole world building process of an actual game. And so what we're going to be doing is that we're firstly going to be creating roads. We're going to be creating the boards for checkpoints and everything. We're going to be creating, we're going to be adding buildings. We're going to be creating a whole park inside the game. We're going to be adding the street lights, traffic lights, trees, and a lot more to make the game hyper realistic and very enjoyable to play. We're also going to be covering my full workflow of lighting the scene and applying textures so that we can learn how to make the game hyper realistic and very appealing to the player. Now, this course is mainly aimed towards Unreal Engine beginners who have very little to no experience inside of Unreal Engine 5. However, knowing how to use at least one 3D software like maybe Blender would be definitely helpful. I personally would recommend you to use Blender, but if you want to use any other 3D software, that's going to be perfectly fine as well. And even if you are experienced inside of Unreal Engine 5, I would actually still recommend you to take this course because in this, we're going to be covering a lot of workflow tips and I'm going to be giving you shortcuts for different things. So no matter if you have experience in Unreal Engine or not, you will definitely take something from this course. But yeah, I really hope you guys are as excited as I am, and I will see you inside the course. Alright guys, welcome to the course. Now let's begin the course with obviously creating an Unreal Engine project. So what I did was I opened Unreal Engine and you can just go to games, and in here we're just going to go to vehicle. So with vehicle, what's going to happen is that it's going to give us like a basic track and like some basic blueprints which we can like use to just work with our project. You can also go you can also just choose a blank project. However, a vehicle project is just going to give us some tools which are gonna just make our project a little easier. Make sure to select blueprint because we're going to be using the blueprints for the coding part, and target platform should be desktop. Quality preset maximum, and if you have an NVIDIA RTX graphic card, be sure to turn on ray tracing because it's going to make your project look a lot better. It's going to make your game lighting look a lot better, the shadows look a lot better. So yeah, just be sure to turn it on if you can. If you can't, that's perfectly fine as well. So project name is I'm just gonna be naming it Unreal actually racing game course. That should be fine. And project location, I'm just gonna set it to default, and then we can just go ahead and press create. So it's just gonna create a brand new project for us. And so right now what I'm going to be doing is that I'm just going to be opening Blender, and we're going to be adding the car and rigging the car inside of Blender before we can go ahead and add it to Unreal Engine. And while we do that, we're also going to let this let Unreal Engine to compile our shaders for us. Okay, so you can also do this in any other 3D software, by the way, other than Blender if you prefer that, but I just personally prefer Blender. So I'm just going to go ahead and open Blender. So and yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything that we have in our scene. Now, I am assuming that you know the basics, the very basics of Blender 3D. If you don't know that, I think you should be fine because I'm going to try to, explain what I'm doing as often as I can. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the internet and I'm just going to be searching for car 3D model. So what we can do is we can just go to Sketchfab. Sketchfab is the website which I usually prefer for a 3D model and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is we can just go back to Sketchfab. We can go to Explore, Downloadable, and then we can, in categories, we can just do cars and vehicles. All right, so you have all these cars which you can download and use. I think I like this one though. But what I did in my original project was I used a Porsche 911. So I'm just going to be searching that. So, which one was, I think mine was this one. So I'm just going to be using this one just to be on the safe side, because some cars which I tried to rig were like their shading was a little off. The shading was a little some cars were a little like low poly, so what I would recommend you to do is make sure that the number of triangles is like quite a lot. Okay, so for example, if I go to, I want to show you an example of a car with like a low number of triangles. So yeah, if you want something like this, oops, my bad, Unreal Engine opened. If you use something like this, you're going to see that it only has 2.4K triangles. So this obviously is not going to look that realistic, right? So the more triangles your car has, the better, the more realistic it's going to look generally. But like obviously there's a limit to that, of course. If it has like a ton of triangles, then obviously it's going to affect performance a lot. But anyways, so we can just go ahead and download this 3D model. Click download, and it luckily it does come with the blend format, in a blend format. But what you can do is you can also just download a GITF. Usually Blender can open GITF without any problems. So yeah, but I'm just gonna go ahead and download the blend format. But yeah, assuming you were to download the GITF format, what you would do is you would just open your Blender project, go to File, Import, and then you're just gonna go to onto GITF and just select your file wherever you have that saved. Okay, so I'm just going to go to downloads now, and I'm just going to be opening this file, source, and this is the Blender file. So what I'm going to do is that actually I'm just going to copy this whole folder. I'm going to drag it on my desktop like that. So I usually like to keep all my stuff on the desktop while I'm working, but when I'm done, I usually just paste all that stuff in a folder, and I just like, just clear up my desktop. Anyways, so what I can do is I can actually go ahead and close Blender for now, and I can just open this brand new project. Now this project is going to come with this car. So if you want to move, if you want to like rotate your camera like this in Blender, what you do is you just hold down your middle mouse button. So that's how you do that. I just wanted to like give you, I'm just going to give you like a little bit of tips for Blender as well along the way. But anyways, so we have this car. It looks pretty good. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go ahead and make sure that our whole body is one object, and our tires, all 4 tires, are separate objects, right? So how exactly do we do that? What we do is that we basically just select different objects, and then we compile. Basically, we just join them into a group. But before that, make sure that everything, like for all of these objects, there are no modifiers applied. But there are no modifiers which are not applied. Make sure that you apply all modifiers. So I'm just gonna go through this, and if obviously any of these have a modifier, it's gonna just show up here. So I'm just gonna like look out for those. I'm just making sure that none of these have any modifiers, because if they have modifiers, what happens is that the shading gets a little janky and it usually doesn't look that great. And also I'm just gonna go back to object mode because I think this is a lot easier to work with. But yeah, let's start with the front left tire. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna select the tire, all the parts of the tire, and you can obviously do some trial and error. And how do you make sure that you've selected all parts? You simply press G and move it to see that you have selected all parts. I think I have, except for this part right here. So I'm just going to do Control Z, and then I'm going to select this part as well. Also make sure that you hold Shift on your keyboard while selecting objects, so that way you can like select all of them. Now make sure that all of them are selected. Yep, they are. And now what we can do is we can just simply press Control J with all of them selected, and that's just gonna join them into one object. So we can move it, and if you also the way we move it is by pressing G. So you can right click to reset the position. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select this, and we're just gonna browse over to the tire itself, and I'm just gonna rename it to wheel, oh my bad, wheel front left, FL. Okay, that's how we usually name tires of cars. Okay, front left. Now let's move on to the rear left tire, the wheel. So I'm just going to be selecting all of the objects very carefully, just like that. G to move it. I think I have selected everything. What's this? No, okay. Yeah, I think I've selected everything. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Control J, and that's just going to compile it into and not compile, it's just going to join them into one object. Actually, we're just going to name these at the end. Let me just select all of them first. Now this part is obviously going to depend on the car that you pick. So if this is your first project, be sure to like not pick like a very complex car, because some cars are going to be like very, they're going to have like a lot of parts. So I would recommend you to start off with like a easy basic car, and I think this Porsche 901 is probably the best place to start. Control J, and yeah, okay. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to name all these tires. So I'm just going to select this one. This is the rear left. So wheel underscore RR, actually RL. This one should be RR. Wheel underscore R. And oops, my bad. Wheel underscore front right. Okay, now let's make sure that we've named everything correctly. So I'm just going to be going here, front left, front right, rear left, and rear right. Perfect. We've named everything correctly. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be selecting anything, right? You can just select anything you want. Also, by the way, be sure to press Control S to save your project. But yeah, I'm just going to be selecting anything, press A to select everything. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Shift and I'm going to click the wheel twice. That's basically to deselect it. So if you click it twice, you're going to see that it's just going to deselect the wheels. So now what we have is we have selected everything apart from the wheels. So if I just try to move it, you're going to see that this is the whole body of the car. Control Z. So now with all of them selected, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be pressing Shift and just selecting anything to make it the active selected object. Because if I do it without that, it's just going to give me an error. So let me just show you the error first, and then we can, I'm just going to show you the solution. So if I press Control Z and like deselect that, so now you're going to see that all of them are dark orange, right? None of them is yellow. Okay, so if I press Control J, you're going to see that it says active object is not a selected mesh. I don't know if you can see that or it's cut off, but there's an error down below. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to press Shift and select anything basically on this mesh, and I'm just going to press Control J. So now you're going to see that this whole body is just going to become one part. Okay, that's perfect. So now what we have in our collection is that we have the wheels and then we have the main body. So I'm just going to name it the body. And now we're done with essentially setting up the car for rigging. Now we just have to make sure that we have applied the rotation and the transformation and everything like that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press A. Also, by the way, in Blender, you don't press Control A, you just press A. So that's just a quick little tip for you. And I'm just going to be rotating it by pressing R and then Z to rotate it in the Z axis, and then -90 to rotate it. Actually, no, +90, because we're gonna have to make sure that the car is facing the positive of the x-axis. And the way I know that this side is positive x-axis is by looking at this. It says x towards there, so that means it's positive x-axis. So R, Z, and then 90, like that. Perfect. So now we're also gonna make sure that our individual, basically our origins for the individual meshes are also oriented correctly. So I'm just gonna select this mode, this move tool right here. Now this part is a little important. What you're gonna do is that you're gonna go to local and make sure that these like what do you call it? These movement things, they align with the actual like world axis as well. So this X is pointing towards the Y axis, right? The positive Y axis, which is not good. That's not what we want. So the way we rotate this is by basically just going to the rotate tool and then just going up to options right here and make sure that transform effect only is set to origins. So this is just going to rotate the origins and nothing else. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be rotating it like this. And also be sure to hold Shift to rotate in increments. Actually, no, Control to rotate in increments. And make sure that you rotate it exactly 90 degrees. Or actually, no, not 90. Let me actually go to the top view and rotate it like that. Exactly. I think it wasn't like oriented perfectly. Actually, it was. Yeah, 90 degrees, like that. Okay, so now you're going to see that the x-axis is facing the x-axis. The y-axis, although, is not facing the y-axis, right? So we got to rotate it like this as well. 90 degrees. And now you're going to see that it's perfectly fine that the z-axis is facing the z-axis and y to y and x to x. Perfect. Now we can just go ahead and turn this off and select the move tool. You're going to see that this is perfectly aligned. Okay, and so we're gonna have to do this. The problem with this is that we're gonna have to do this individually for all the tires. So let's actually go ahead and just do that. Now this is probably the most boring part of this whole course, so don't worry, this is not that boring later on. But yeah, I think it's pretty fun to like, you know, make a game, and especially like if you're like into playing games. For me, this whole project was like very fun, honestly. But yeah, so like that, and then like this. Perfect. And this as well. So with this, I'm just gonna be rotating the x-axis to align that. And also up here, you can see just make sure that you focus right here. You're gonna see the degrees that we're rotating it to. That's how you know that you're rotating it correctly. You're gonna see that it says rotation minus 90 local up there on the top left side. So that's how you make sure that you're rotating it correctly. And lastly, this one. Perfect. I think we should be good. Just make sure to turn this off and make sure to go to the top view and make sure that all the origins are the same. Perfect. So we are good to go. Now we can go ahead and rig this car. So for rigging, the process is pretty simple. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to the internet and you're going to have to go to this website right here, continuebreak.com/creations/UE4 vehicle rigging add-on blender. And so this is basically an add-on which is made for Unreal Engine, and it's made for Blender to rig vehicles for Unreal Engine. So what we do is we just go to this website and we just go to download. It's going to take you to Gumroad, and you can obviously pay for it if you want, but if you type in 0, that's perfectly fine as well. And then it's just gonna and then you can just press get, and it's going to send you an email with this add-on. So I already have this add-on installed, but I'm going to show you how to install it as well. But yeah, once you have downloaded that file from your email, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to edit, preferences, and click add-ons. Okay. And then you're just going to have to go to install and then go to downloads, or wherever you have that add-on installed, add-on downloaded, and then just select that add-on and press install add-on. Make sure it's a zip file, and that should be perfectly fine. So once you have that installed, you're just gonna see it right here. But I'm just gonna search it, UE4. Actually, vehicle, yeah, Unreal Engine 4 vehicle rigger. Just make sure that this is checked, it's turned on. It's not going to be turned on by default, by the way. You're gonna have to turn it on yourself. So once that is done, you're gonna see it right here. If you don't have this menu, by the way, you can just click this button right here, and it's gonna open up this menu for you. So you can just go to UE4 vehicle, and then you can start rigging the car. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that firstly, the vehicle base is obviously going to be this body. So we're just going to set that in. Wheel front right, it's just going to be the wheel front right. Wheel rear right is going to be the wheel rear right. Wheel front left is going to be the wheel front left. And the wheel rear left is going to be such a tongue twister. The wheel rear left is going to be the wheel rear left. Perfect. So once we have all these basically parts set up, what are we going to do? What we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and press rig vehicle, but right now you can see that it's grayed out. So before that, what we're going to do is that we're going to set unit scale. Now you're not going to notice anything happen, but if I just go ahead and open up the measure tool, you're going to see, if I go to side view and if I measure this, you're going to see that it's literally 0.01 meters. So that's very small. That's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go ahead and add a cube. And you're going to see that the default cube is that much bigger. So basically just make sure that the, the units are the same for Unreal Engine and Blender, which they are by default, they're not. So we're going to have to scale it according to Unreal Engine. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click this button right here to make sure that we can see through the cube as well. And let's first measure it. So I think we want the car to be something like this long. Okay. So I'm just going to select the cube, move it up. This is just for reference. The cube is just for reference. So also if you're not sure about the height of your car, so what you can do is you can just search for your car name on Google and then height. So that's just going to give you the height. But yeah, I'm just going to select all these parts. And I'm going to press S and scale them up like that till it hits the top of the cube. So the cube, what we did with the cube was we just used it for a reference to make sure that our scaling is fine. So I'm just going to move the tires a little up. By the way, you use G to move up. So now you can press Alt Z or just click this button right here to go back to the solid view mode. And we can just go ahead and delete this cube. So now you're going to see that the vehicle is perfectly ready for rigging. But before that, one last step. I'm really sorry. There are quite a lot of steps. I do understand that, but trust me, this is probably the most boring part of this tutorial. Everything after this is super fun. But yeah, so we're going to have to go ahead right here, click this and click face orientation and make sure everything on the outside is blue. If anything is red, what you're going to do is you're going to select that object, press tab to go into edit mode. Press A to select everything, select all. Everything was selected by default, by the way. Go to mesh, normals, and then flip. Okay, make sure that all the red faces are selected, only the red faces are selected. And so yeah, that's how you invert normal. So if anything doesn't have like a correct normal, you're gonna see if I move far, you're gonna see that the window is becoming, and like some parts of the car are becoming red, but that doesn't really matter because that's from the inside. If I show you from the inside of the car, you're gonna see that some parts are red from the inside, but that doesn't really matter because we're gonna be looking at the car from the outside, right? Make sure everything from the outside of the car is blue. That's just gonna make sure that it looks good in Unreal Engine. Otherwise, it's gonna look super weird. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn off the face orientation. So now we can just go ahead and click rig vehicle, and that's perfectly fine. Our vehicle is finally rigged. Now make sure after rigging the vehicle that you once again go to object mode, and then once again just make sure that the face orientation is fine, because sometimes when you rig cars or when you like join objects, it is gonna mess up the normals sometimes, but like thankfully this is not the case with us. Perfect. So now our car is ready to be exported out to Unreal Engine. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go to File. Actually, make sure to save the project before. Go to File, Export, and then FBX. So we're going to be exporting this as an FBX file. And then we can just go to Desktop. And I can just make a folder called Game Course Assets. So, and inside this, we can just drop car. Actually, no, Porsche, because we might add more cars later. But yeah, this is the car model. Perfect. So everything should be exported. Now let's move on to Unreal Engine, and then we can simply just create a level, and then we can import this car into Unreal Engine. So now I'm just going to minimize Blender. I'm not going to close it right now because we might have to come back to it and maybe import some things again. But yeah, if you open Unreal Engine, by default, it should look something like this. This content browser is a separate window for now. I don't know why, but like I'm just going to close it. And because we have our content drawer right here. So what I usually like to do is I usually just like to open the content drawer and then just dock it in layout so that we have it whenever we want it, right? Because it's a pretty important part of our, our whole game. Okay. So now let me just give you a basic rundown of how Unreal Engine, how to move in Unreal Engine and how the editor works. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to right click with your mouse, and then you can just move your mouse to look around, and you can use the WASD keys like first person shooter game to move in like 2 dimensions. And then in the 3rd dimension, what you can do is you can press Q to go down and E to go up. So that's how you move in Unreal Engine. Right, so this basically this game comes with like a basic track. We're not going to be using this though. You can use it if you want, but I'm just going to be like building everything from scratch. But also you can just go ahead and press play to see how this game looks. So this basically yeah, so this essentially just comes with a pre-made game, and yeah, so that's how this is right now. Yeah, this game, the physics of this game is like are pretty basic. We're going to be hopefully making our game look a lot better. But yeah, so I'm just going to press escape to get out of the game. But yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to be importing the car for now, and then we can just go ahead and set up the car, and then we can just start making the world, and we're going to be changing everything in this world. But yeah, right now let's just leave it as it is. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to be right clicking the contour folder, and I'm going to be creating a new folder, and let me just call this game assets, like that. And then what I can do is I can just simply go ahead and right click again, right click here and create a new folder again, and I can just name this car should be fine. And now what I can do is I can go to File Explorer and just browse to wherever I had that saved. So this file, I'm just going to be dragging this file right inside the content drawer. And now these settings are relatively important. So what you can do is you're going to have to make sure that skeletal mesh and import mesh is turned on, and go down and create new materials. This is turned on as well. This is pretty important. So once you click import all, you're going to have to wait for a bit, but then the mesh should hopefully be imported properly. Okay, so it just gave us some errors, but that doesn't really matter. So we can just go ahead and cross it out. Now you're going to see that we have a lot of materials, which is pretty good because we obviously need materials. And then down here we have 3 things: the skeletal mesh, skeleton, and physics asset. Now the first thing I like to do is I just like to like drag in the skeletal mesh into our scene and just inspect it to make sure nothing is wrong with the mesh. Because sometimes what happens is that some normals won't be fine, some shading won't be fine. So just make sure that everything is fine, which I think it's pretty decent. Yeah, the whole mesh is pretty decent. And yeah, I think we should be good to go with like the whole setting this vehicle up part. Make sure to save all and press Control S as well. Those two things are not the same and they're different in Unreal Engine for some reason. But yeah, make sure to do both. Okay, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to have to install a plugin which basically comes with Unreal Engine, but it's not enabled by default. So we're going to have to go ahead and enable that. So I'm just going to go to Settings, Plugins, and then we can just search for Chaos. So if we actually, yeah, Chaos Vehicle Plugins. Make sure that this is checked. But actually, yeah, since we're in the car project already, so in the car project it is turned on by default. But if you did blank, you're gonna have to turn this on by yourself. So now we can go ahead and set up the car, basically make the car drivable. All right, so now what we can do is that we can just go ahead and firstly what I'm gonna do is that I'm just gonna select all these materials, and I'm just gonna actually let me just create a new folder first. New folder, materials, and then just select all these and just drag them into this folder just to, like, you know, make things a little more organized. So what we can do is we can just right click this and actually yeah, we can just do it here because I was thinking of creating another subfolder, but I think that's going to be a little too much. But we can just go ahead and create a blueprint class. So I'm going to click all classes and I'm just going to be searching for wheeled vehicle pawn. So this is what we're going to be creating, and just select this and create it. And I'm just going to be naming this car BP for blueprint, and we can just go ahead and open this. So now you're going to see that in this, what we're going to be doing is that we're just going to be adding the car, right? So we're just going to go to mesh and we're going to select the skeletal mesh asset. We're just going to be setting it to the Porsche 911. And that should be it. That's basically our car in it. So now what we're going to be doing is that we're firstly going to be adding a camera. But so a camera is going to be mounted onto a spring arm, which is basically an arm which is going to, like, you know, just control the camera movement. But I'm just going to be adding a spring arm. And so the spring arm is basically going to be parented to the mesh so that, like, let me give you an example. So if we, like, you can see this is the spring arm, right? So if we move the mesh, actually, I don't think we can move the mesh, but like, yeah, if we were to move the mesh, the spring arm is going to go with it, right? That's exactly what it is. So, and then we're just going to be adding a camera as well. So if you add a camera, and now this camera, this is where parenting comes into play. So if I move the spring arm, you're going to see that the camera is going to move with it. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're not going to be moving the camera. We're just going to be moving the spring arm because the camera is sort of attached to the spring arm. So I'm just going to be moving it somewhere there. Let's rotate it too a little bit. So I think that should be like a good starting point for our, actually, oops, my bad. We should probably move it a little higher, something like that. Actually, no, that's a little too high. But yeah, a little above. Yeah, we can obviously tweak this later. But yeah, for now, I think this should be a good starting view. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually compile this first, and then let's configure the vehicle itself. So the vehicle has basically a few components. It has the engine, it has the wheels, obviously, and so we're gonna have to configure all those one by one. So let's actually start with the wheels, because obviously the wheels are what's gonna basically move and all that, right? So let's go ahead and go to the wheel setup. And in this wheel setup, this is basically an array, right? So we're gonna be adding 4 array elements because we have 4 wheels. So now firstly, we're gonna be adding the bone names. So the bone names are gonna be basically, if you follow this tutorial exactly, they should be, what do you call it? Front right, and then front left, and then rear left, oops, rear right, and then rear left. But I'm going to be telling you how to check these as well if you don't know the exact names. Rear left. Let me compile this. If you want to know these names, what you can do is you can just go to the physics asset, and here you're going to see that we have this front left, front right, rear left, and rear right. Okay, we are going to be configuring the physics asset later on, but right now we don't need to worry about that. So that should be fine. Okay, so one thing which I'm going to change is that we're going to be starting with the left wheel first, because I did some research and apparently you're supposed to I watched a few YouTube videos and apparently you're supposed to start with the left first. Okay, so let's do that and let's save it. Now we also need a wheel class as well. So for the wheel class, what we're going to be doing is that we're just going to be right clicking this blueprint class, and then we're going to be searching for chaos, and then it just says chaos vehicle wheel. So select that, and we are going to be, then just the actually wheel front BP, and we are going to be duplicating this. So just duplicate and wheel back rear, basically rear BP. Perfect. So now we have two wheel blueprints, so we can just go ahead and add them. So I'm just going to be selecting the wheel class and then wheel front BP, because this is the front BP, and for the second two we're going to be selecting the wheel rear BP. Now we are going to be making changes to this, of course, but yeah, for now let's just compile this. Let's close this and this. Perfect. So now we can just go ahead and open the wheels. So in this, we don't really need to create any nodes or do anything. We're just going to go to the details panel, and here we can just tweak some settings. So the wheel radius, we're going to be changing this later on if we need to, but I think it should be fine right now. Wheel mass, and you can obviously play around with these settings. If you want the most realistic experience, what you can do is you can just search for the wheel mass of the actual car that you're using. So yeah, you can just do that. So the front wheels are going to be affected by brake, affected by handbrake, affected by engine. Okay, those are going to be set up, and then it's also going to be affected by steering as well. Okay, so the wheel angle, let's just set it to 50 right now. We can change it later if you want, but yeah, so that should be it. And for the rear, what we're going to do, affected by handbrake, engine, and brake, but then this is obviously not going to be, the rear wheels are not going to be affected by steering. Okay, so we're going to have to do that. And I think everything else should be fine. You can obviously play around with these settings if you want, but for now I think we should be good to go. Okay, last thing to do before we can actually like test this vehicle is the physics asset. So the physics asset, what we're going to be doing is that it does come with some physics some collision meshes by default, but we're going to be deleting all those. So just go to settings, and I think you're supposed to go to all bones, show all bones, and then you can just select all these and just delete them. Okay, so now we can just uncheck this again, show actually no, I think it should be fine. We can just leave this on. But yeah, so so for the front left, I'm just going to be adding a collision. Let me just make this full screen. So I'm just going to go down to the tools, tool, and the primitive type should be sphere for the wheels. And let's add bodies. And now you're going to see that it's just going to add a collision to them. So for the wheels, I'm going to do a sphere, and for the body, I'm going to do something else, which I'm going to tell you in a bit. So sphere, again, add bodies. So these are basically the collision meshes that we're adding. And for the rear right, also a sphere. And then for the rear left. Now this part is relatively easy. You're just going to add collision meshes, and let's go to the root now. And for this, instead of, if you do sphere, of course, you're going to see that it's going to be very unrealistic, because obviously the car is not rolling around, right? The car has to have like a proper collision shape, because we are going to have it collide with like different objects, different obstacles and stuff like that. So the primitive type, I'm just going to set it to single convex hull. This is just going to give us a more accurate collision. You can also set it to multi-convex hull, but that's going to be more intensive on our computer. But actually, let me just go ahead and do that. Let's see what that does. So I think we should be good. Let's see how a single convex hull looks. Yeah, it's basically the same thing, yeah. But if you want like a very, yeah, usually multi-convex hull is more, what do you call it, accurate than single convex hull. But in our situation, it should be, both of them are the same, and it should be perfectly fine. Just go ahead and save it, and let's cross it out. Okay, so next up what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go back to the blueprint class, and we're going to have to set up the, what do you call it, the engine. So we're done with the wheels, but we're going to go down, and now we're going to go down to engine setup. So what we get is basically we get a torque curve. So if we double click this, it's going to open up. And so what we're going to be doing is that we're just going to be creating a curve to the maximum torque. Now basically you can just Google the maximum torque for your car, but I'm just going to go to, I think I did something like something around 500. So I'm just going to be clicking, I'm going to be control clicking. Actually no, it's shift clicking. Yeah, my bad. Oops, my bad. Once again. So let me just select this and delete it. So something like that. I don't know where the 0 point is. Okay, so we're just going to be starting from here, and I'm kind of lost in this curve, in this graph, but okay. So now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be starting from here. Just shift click right here, and then you can just create a whole curve. Actually, I think I went a little above, what do you call it, 500. So I'm just going to be bringing my points down. But yeah, you just need to like create a curve. And now what exactly this does, you're gonna have to experiment with that. Because so this is basically how fast, I think this is how fast your car gains speed. So you can like control that. I think this curve could be a little more steep, something like that. I think something like that should be good. Yeah, that seems to be decent. So basically, when you accelerate the car, it's gonna gain speed like this. It's gonna gain more speed in the beginning and less speed as it goes up to the maximum acceleration, maximum speed. Okay, so now also the max RPM, I think this controls your speed. So if you increase it to something like 7,000, now you're gonna now your speed is gonna be a lot more. But I'm not gonna increase it right now. I'm just gonna be setting it to 4,500 right now, so that I can show you the difference later on when we are making, you know, the car faster. Because that's something which I really struggled with when I was first making this game, because I couldn't figure out what was the like how do you accelerate the car more, and how do you increase the top speed. But yeah, again, the mass. Okay, so the mass is pretty important because this is going to control the stability of your car. So if you know anything about cars, you're going to know that the heavier your car is, the slower it's going to go, and also the more stable it's going to be. And also another major thing which is going to control your stability is this center of mass thing. So if you click the center of mass override, and if you decrease these values, it's going to greatly affect how your car handles, how your car turns, how your car takes corners. That's going to be greatly affected by this. I'm not going to be turning this on right now because we are going to do a whole part of this course which is going to be dedicated to, you know, teaching you the game mechanics, teaching you the car mechanics of Unreal Engine, and we're going to be experimenting with these values in just a bit. But let me just get the car up and running first, and then we're gonna go ahead and do all that. So let's compile this. Everything should be fine. Now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to actually go ahead and create a game mode, and then we're going to create a player start as well. So I think we already do have a player start in this game. But what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to find the player start. Where is it? Okay, it's right there. So that's perfectly fine. We can just go to the player start and we can start the game from here. But right now, if I just click play, you're going to see that it's not actually loading up our car. It's actually loading up this car, which is set as the default. What do you call it? Default player. Okay. So what you can do, you have, so what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be going ahead and creating a new game mode. So I'm just going to go to the game assets folder, right click this and just create a new folder called game mode. So we're going to go ahead and create a game mode. So we're just going to right click this and we're going to go to blueprint class and then just game mode base. Select that. And I'm just going to call this car game mode. Perfect. So now we have this whole new game mode, and let me just make sure to save everything, save selected. So this game mode is basically where pretty much all of our, like most of our game code is going to be. It's basically the blueprint class, which is going to sort of control your whole game, and it's going to like run your whole game. But right now what we're using this for is simply just go inside it and just go to the default pawn class and make sure to set this to car BP. This is the blueprint class that we are using. Basically it's our car, right? So we have that. And right now, if I still go ahead and press play, you're going to see that we're still not seeing that. So what's the matter with this? The problem with this is that right now this game mode is not being used. In order to use this game mode, we're just going to go to world settings, game mode override, and just select our own game mode, car game mode. Perfect. Alternatively, you can also go up here and just select the game mode like this. Okay, so you can just use this to, actually this is already set, but if it wasn't, it's just going to give you an option to set the game mode. But now if I go ahead and play, you're going to see that we have this car. Okay, but right now we can't move it. We can do nothing because we haven't set up the controls for anything yet. All right, so let's go ahead and set up the controls first. And for that, we're going to have to go back to the car BP. So in this, what we're going to do is that we're firstly going to be setting up the functionality to control basically the camera to pan around the car. All right, so the code is basically going to be something like this. So we're going to be dragging in the spring arm. So basically the spring arm is what we're trying to control, right? And what exactly are we trying to do with this spring arm? If I go back to my viewport, you're going to see that all we're trying to do is that we're trying to rotate this, right? We're trying to rotate this in different angles. I'm just going to undo this, make sure that it's undone. Yeah. So So we're going to go back to the event graph, and what exactly we're trying to do is we're trying to add rotation to this, right? So I'm just going to be dragging off of this, and we can just search add relative rotation, right? Because what we're trying to do is we're just trying to add, basically we're just trying to take this rotation, like the actual rotation value, and we're just trying to add rotation. Yeah, we're just that's exactly what we're doing. So I'm trying to explain now why we're doing exactly what we're doing. But yeah, so now what we're going to be doing is that we're just going to be adding an event, which is going to be mouse x axis. Okay, mouse events, mouse x. So this is what this is that basically it's going to be triggered whenever we move our mouse in the x axis, and this is going to trigger this event, right? Because basically what exactly we're doing is that we're just trying to map out the mouse x-axis to the z-axis of the spring arm, because the spring arm is going to be rotated in the z-axis, right? Because let me show you an example. So if I just click global, when we move our mouse in the y-axis, we want the camera to rotate like this, right? And that is basically the z-axis rotation. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. So right now this whole rotation is basically just one component. So we're just going to right click this, and we're going to click split struct pin. This is going to split it into like 3 different values, the x, y, and z rotation. And we're just going to plug the axis value of this into the z rotation of this. Now I do understand this is a little complicated to understand. If you don't understand it fully right now, that's perfectly fine. I honestly didn't understand it the first time when I did it. But yeah, eventually you are going to get used to this, and it is going to be perfectly fine. So what we're doing is that we're just using the x-axis to control the rotation, but now we're also going to be needing to rotate it in another axis using the mouse y-axis, right? So I'm just going to be adding this again, add relative rotation, and then right click this, split struct pin, and then we are just going to be right clicking and adding a mouse y effect. Oops, mouse y event. Okay. So we're just going to be plugging this in, and this, so let's figure out what axis we're trying to rotate it in, right? So if we move our mouse in the y axis, we want to rotate it in the y axis, right? Like this. So let's go ahead and plug this into the y axis. Perfect. Let's compile this, and let's actually test if this is actually working or not. So if I play this, you're going to see that if I move my mouse, you're going to see that it's perfectly fine, and it's moving around the car. Perfect. We still can't drive any or anything like that, and the car for some reason is floating on top of the floating in the air. So we're gonna have to fix that as well, but that's not a problem. But yeah, congratulations, you just made yourself you just made yourself like a moving camera, and that's pretty good. Okay, so next up we're gonna figure out why the car is moving is floating in the air. So for that, what we can do first is that we can maybe go ahead and yeah, we can go ahead and try to reduce the wheel radius. Let's reduce it to something like 16, just to make sure that this is not the problem. I'm pretty sure it's not, but like it might be. So we're just trying to make sure that this is not the problem. Okay, that is not perfect. So we're just going to go ahead and undo this and set it back to 32. I think the problem is with collisions with our skeletal, with our physics asset. So, or actually, the problem is not with this. I just realized what the problem is. So what we're doing right now is, for the physics to actually work, you're going to have to check an option which is basically simulate physics, which we haven't done yet, which I forgot to do. So we're just going to go back to the vehicle movement component, just search for physics, and then actually, was it in this? Yeah, it's in the mesh. Okay, it's in the mesh. Search for physics, and just make sure that simulate physics is turned on. So we have all the settings ready, but the problem is that we weren't like simulating the physics. So now we're simulating physics, and now it's perfectly fine. Now our tires are slightly above the ground, which is gonna be fixed by reducing the wheel radius. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be on the front wheel. Let's set it to something like 28. Let's see how that does. So I'm just gonna be bringing it down, and let's play the game. Let's see how it looks. So the problem is still there. Oh, okay, yeah, I think it's a lot less. So I think something like 26 might be fine. 26 should be fine. Yeah, 26 is perfect. And for the back, we're going to do something like 28, or actually 30. Rear BP, let's do 30. And let's see how this looks. Yeah, now they're both perfectly flushed in the ground, like they're perfectly resting on the ground. So that's perfectly fine. Now let's add the movement part of the car. How exactly can we like make the car move? After that, we're going to be making the tires rotate, and after that, we're going to be moving to the most interesting part, in my opinion, which is the texturing, because that's when we actually make this car look a lot realistic, a lot more realistic, and then we can like start building the world around it and stuff like that. All right, so before we actually like make the movement part of the car, we're just going to go to File and actually Edit and Project Settings. And then we can just add some controls which we are going to be using to basically move the car, right? So we're going to need to add controls in here. So we're going to go down to Input. So we're going to use action mappings and axis mappings to, add controls to this. So first let's add an axis mapping, which is going to be, I'm just going to call this throttle. So this is good. This is going to be basically the force which is going to move the car ahead. And so the mouse, the key which we're going to be assigning to this is going to be W. If you are, by the way, if you're using a controller as well, actually, let me just connect my controller so I can like show you how to like add controls from the controller as well. Because I'm sure a lot of you will be making games which can be operated by controllers as well. So let me just go ahead and connect my controller real quick. Okay, so I just connected my controller. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be pressing this plus button right here. So it's going to be W and another key, okay? So if I click this button right here, and if I press the right trigger on my key, on my, on my controller, you're going to see that it's automatically going to detect that. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do. And if I go down, if I actually press plus and add another one, there's going to be brake. So I'm just going to add a keyboard mapping to this. For brake, I'm going to do S and another one, which is going to be the right trigger. Oops. Left trigger. So I'm just going to press that, and that's going to be added right here. So that's actually the benefit of you doing this. Otherwise, you can just create nodes for the W key or like whatever inside the blueprint. But like the benefit of adding the input controls here is so that you can add multiple controls for the same action. Okay, and then we're going to be adding steering. So steering underscore right. And so then we're going to be adding steering. And in this, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be adding two different controls for a scale of positive and negative. So the positive one is going to be right. So if I press D on my keyboard, there's going to be +1. And if I press A, this should be -1, because obviously we're trying to move into in the opposite directions, right? So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, and we can also add the console, the controller option of this as well. So the turning left, turning right should be actually I think we don't need to like add 2 of those. Yeah, I think we should be good with like 1 of those. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. Because with the controller, it's going to detect if it's like a positive value or a negative value. That's perfectly fine. So I think we should be done with this. And now what we can do is we can just go ahead and just cross this out. So we can just cross this out right here. And we can go back to the car BP and just maximize this. And oops, my bad. I'm just going to be clicking these buttons right here to like, make these smaller. And okay. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm actually just going to be doing like a whole separate thing. And so what we're going to be doing is that we're actually going to be dragging in the vehicle movement component. And to this, we can basically search for throttle. So set throttle input. And we can also search for, set brake input. And then we can also do set steering input. So that's exactly what we're trying to change, right? We're trying to change the throttle, brake, and then steering. And now we can just plug the respective values, control mappings. Oops, my bad. Control mappings to all of these. So if I go to input, axis events, you're going to see that this is the event which we added in project settings right now. So we're just going to be plugging that into the throttle input. And the brake one, we're just going to be clicking brake, and then axis events is set it to brake. And that should be fine. And steering, again, we're just going to be searching for steering. And so once we're added all these, we're also going to be adding the axis values into all of these as well. Because obviously these are the actual values which are going to be passed on, right? So let's try to run it and let's see if the car is moving or not. So the car is moving, but right now you're going to see that it's very unstable. But yeah, it's basically getting the job done. And yeah, but we have a lot of work to do on the car. It's the tires are not moving, and but yeah, the car is at least moving, so that's perfectly fine. So now I'm just going to be crossing this out, and let's click save all and control S. So I think we are basically done with the movement part of the car. Now we can actually go ahead and make the tires rotate, and then we're going to be working on the physics of the car and like making the car actually fun to drive. Alright, so to animate the wheels, it's actually a pretty simple process. We just need to enable the animation, and that has a few steps, but like we don't really like need to do any hard work. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be right clicking the skeleton, and we're going to be going to create an animation blueprint. So we need this animation blueprint for in order for the car to rotate the tires. And so I think that should be fine. Okay. So now what we can do is we can just go ahead and open the car animation blueprint. So we're going to have to go to class settings, and we're going to have to change the parent class to vehicle animation instance. Now this is basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to access the animations, right? So we're setting the class which has all the animations as the parent class of this class. So if you know anything about programming, you know that the functions and the events and everything, they are transferred from one class to another if the first class is the parent of the second class, right? So that's essentially what we're trying to do. It's not really that needed, like knowing this knowledge, but like it's just better to know what exactly you're doing. So what we're going to do right now is that we're just going to be searching for a function which is basically a control which is inside this parent class, and it's called wheel controller for wheel vehicle. I know it's a pretty weird name, but yeah. And we're just going to plug this in, and it's going to basically add this extra node for us. We don't really need to understand what exactly this does. I honestly don't understand what it does as well. It's just that we're trying to access an animation from this parent class, and we're going to apply this to the animation, this car right here. And so we're going to be doing one last thing, which is going to be, we're going to be adding a mesh space reference pose. Now this thing, again, you don't need to know how this works or what this does. Just know that we're trying to copy an animation from a parent class and applying it to our mesh. Okay, just click compile, and I think we should be good to go. Let's actually go ahead and try to see if it works. It doesn't. The reason for that is because we haven't actually haven't connected this animation blueprint to this blueprint class. So we're just going to go to the blueprint. Let's go to mesh, and let's go to animation. Actually, the animation is right here. And so if I extend this, you're going to see animation mode is I use animation blueprint, which is perfectly fine. However, the animation class is going to be set to our animation class, which we just created. Porsche 911 anim blueprint, compile this, and we should be good to go. Now you're going to see that the tires are rotating. Perfect. That's very good. And you can see the animation of the tires is like very realistic and very good. And they're perfectly, matched to the actual movement of the car, which is perfectly fine. But again, the problem with the car is that the suspension is like super, it feels like a proper SUV. However, it's supposed to be a sports car. So we're going to have to fix the physics of the car, and we're going to have to make some tweaks to it. But honestly, this part is like super interesting for me because you get to play around with like different physics things, and it's actually pretty interesting to learn all that. All right, so let's actually begin with that. All right, so let's start to tweak the car. And so firstly, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be addressing the fact that this car is, also one thing which I'm noticing right now is that the front tire is a little flushed in the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out of that, wheel front BP. I'm just going to set this back to 30 because the reason why we had to set it to a higher value before was because it seemed as if it was off the ground, but it wasn't. So both of them should have the same height, the same radius. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm just going to go to car BP. And what we're going to be addressing first is the fact that the car is basically, the car is wobbling a lot. Like when we, go forward and go back, the car is wobbling a lot. That's what we're going to address. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to go to the internet and I'm going to search for Porsche 911 weight. Let's see how much it weighs. So it weighs around 3,000 pounds. So 3,000 pounds to kilograms. So that's around 1360. All right. So I'm just going to go to this and let's actually go to the vehicle movement component and go down to, where's the mass? The mass. Let's set it to 1350. Or actually something like 1500 should be fine. The only thing which we need to do is we need to enable center of mass override. And this is basically the X, Y, and Z values of this. So Z, I'm going to be setting it to -20, something like -20. Let's try it out. So, this should help with it. So you can see that it is somewhat helping with it, but like it's still pretty big. The issue is still pretty evident. So what we can do is we can set it to maybe something like -50. -50 should be fine. Let's see how it looks. As you can see now, it's like a lot more, the car is a lot more realistic. And yeah, let me actually reduce it even further. Something like -60 should be fine. Because Porsche, this Porsche is a pretty, like this car is pretty low, and it's supposed to be like a very fast sports car. So we don't really want it to, have a lot of wobble. And the what do you call it? The suspension should be pretty hard because it's supposed to be a car. It's a car made for the track, right? So track cars usually have very tight suspensions. So let's do that. And apart from that, if you want to increase the friction of the ground, and let me actually show you why you would want to do that. So we can, if we go ahead and if we turn, also by the way, when you turn, the camera looks a little weird. So we're going to fix that as well. So if we turn, you're going to see that the car is turning pretty slow. Like, we can't really, actually, what? Let's go ahead and add a handbrake too, so that we can like actually brake, what do you call it? We can do some drifting as well. So let's go to edit, project settings, and go down to input. And then actually a handbrake is going to be an action mapping because, with all of these, we need the scale value. We need to modify a value, but like a handbrake is either on or it's off, right? So it's like, we don't really need a scale value for that. So I'm just going to call this handbrake. The action mapping, let's set it to the spacebar. That should be fine. And now we can go back to the event graph. And in here, what we can do is we can just drag from the vehicle component, a vehicle movement component, and we can just set this to set handbrake input. So basically in this, what we have to do is we have to toggle this on and off. So the way we do that is by right clicking, and let's do handbrake. So this is the action event that which we just created. So if it's pressed, it's gonna basically trigger this event, which is gonna have the handbrake on. And let's actually just go ahead and duplicate this. So I'm just gonna hold Alt. Actually, no, not hold Alt. I'm just gonna press Control C and then Control V, duplicate this, and then if it's released, it's gonna trigger this event right here, which is not gonna have the handbrake turned on. I hope that makes sense. It's just basic logic, which you, I am assuming that like the very basics of programming, like just the basics of programming in general. So if you know them, you should understand how this works. So there's an issue with this. Okay, so the problem is that the vehicle movement component should be the target of this as well. So just do that. And now if we move forward and we press space, it should just brake. It's just do the handbrake. All right, let's see if we can sort of brake, drift. So we can like do a little bit of drifting, but it's not really, the car isn't fast enough to brake, to drift. I don't know why I keep saying brake instead of drift, but yeah. Let me just search for RPM of, what do you call it, Porsche 911. Let's see. So the RPM is around 9,000. Okay, so right now our RPM is literally half of that. That's why the car is feeling pretty slow. So let me just go to the vehicle component, movement component, and max RPM, let's set it to 9,000, because I'm trying to make this like a very realistic car. Okay, and you're gonna see that the car is gonna feel a lot faster. I can already feel the difference. That now I feel like pull a little bit of handbrake, you are gonna notice that we can drift a little bit. Of course, not that like yeah, this was a pretty good drift. We're not going to be adding like very advanced drifting physics, but I think this should be fine for us. All right, so let's get out of the car and let's see what else to work on. So I think our car is looking pretty decent. It's feeling pretty hard. It's the what do you call it? The suspension is feeling pretty stiff, as it should, because it's a sports car. Of course, you're gonna have to modify this based on your car. If it's like an off-road car, if it's an SUV, if you're, I don't know, if you're maybe adding like a G-Wagon, the suspension is going to have to be a lot more loose and the car should have like some wobble. But again, that comes down to basically your knowledge of cars. And I would recommend you watching some like YouTube videos on like how cars work and how the physics of cars work. And yeah, just do something like that. But yeah, let me make sure that our spring arm looks, so right now, you're gonna see that if I play the play the game, and I can move this camera, but if I turn, it's very stiff, like it's basically just locked on to the car. That's not something we want. We want the camera to have a little bit of lag, a little bit of delay between the car and the camera, which is going to make it look a lot more smoother. So for that, we're going to go down to the spring arm. We're going to go down to lag, and then enable camera lag and enable rotation lag. So the camera lag, right now, let me just actually show you what the default settings do, so that then we can understand why we're making the change that we're making. So right now, you're going to see that the camera lag is making the car go ahead, and the turn is adding some, the camera rotation lag is adding some lag to the rotation. So I usually don't like adding camera lag. I just like adding rotation lag, because I think that just looks a lot better, in my opinion. So now you're going to see that if I turn, it feels a lot more natural, and it feels like a proper racing game, right? And now it feels a lot more fun to drive as well. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So we're done with that as well. Now what we can go ahead and do is we can maybe start texturing the car, which is honestly my favorite part.